The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered behind the iron gates, cameras ready to capture the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Among the crowd stood Marcus Wellington, a wealthy businessman from New York who had made his fortune in real estate. His expensive Italian suit and gold watch caught the sunlight as he pushed his way through the gathering spectators, clearly annoyed by the press of ordinary people around him. Marcus had arrived in London 3 days earlier for what he called a business trip, though it was more of a luxury vacation funded by his company's profits. He owned several high-end hotels across Manhattan and had grown accustomed to getting his way in every situation. The idea of waiting in a crowd with regular tourists irritated him immensely, especially since he considered himself above such common experiences. Standing near the palace gates was Sergeant James Morrison, a 28-year-old member of the Queen's Guard who had served his country with honor for nearly a decade. James came from a working-class family in Yorkshire and had joined the military straight out of school to support his widowed mother and younger sister. His red tunic was perfectly pressed, his bearskin hat positioned exactly as regulations demanded, and his rifle held with the precision that came from years of disciplined training. The crowd grew larger as the ceremony time approached, with families from around the world excited to witness this piece of British tradition. Children pointed excitedly at the guards in their distinctive uniforms, while parents snapped photos and tried to explain the historical significance of what they were seeing. Street vendors sold miniature Union Jack flags and postcards, adding to the festive atmosphere that surrounded the palace every morning. Marcus found himself increasingly frustrated as more people filled the area around him. He had expected to have a clear view and possibly even special access, given his wealth and status back home. However, London didn't operate according to his usual rules, and he was just another face in the crowd of tourists eager to see the famous guards. "Excuse me," Marcus said loudly to a family standing in front of him, his American accent cutting through the morning chatter. "I need to get to the front. I have important business connections here." The family, visitors from Germany, looked confused and simply smiled politely without moving. This only added to Marcus's growing anger as he realized his usual tactics of intimidation through wealth weren't working in this environment. Sergeant Morrison maintained his position with the stoic professionalism expected of the Queen's Guard, despite being able to hear the commotion developing in the crowd nearby. Years of training had taught him to remain focused regardless of distractions, whether they came from overeager tourists, sudden weather changes, or unexpected incidents. His duty was to maintain his post with dignity and represent the honor of his regiment and his country. The businessman's frustration reached a boiling point when a group of school children on an educational trip began moving past him, their teacher guiding them toward a better viewing spot that Marcus had been eyeing for himself. Their innocent excitement and the teacher's patient explanations about British history only served to remind Marcus how ordinary this experience was, far from the exclusive treatment he felt he deserved. "This is ridiculous," Marcus muttered loud enough for those around him to hear. "I didn't pay thousands of dollars to come to London just to stand behind a bunch of kids and tourists." Several people in the crowd began to notice his increasingly aggressive behavior, with some parents instinctively moving their children away from the agitated American businessman. James continued his duty, aware of the growing tension but trained to maintain his position unless directly threatened or ordered to respond. The Queen's Guard were famous worldwide for their ability to remain motionless and professional despite any provocation, a tradition that had been maintained for centuries and was part of what made them such an iconic symbol of British discipline and dedication. As the official ceremony began, with the sound of military bands approaching from the distance, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Unable to accept his position in the crowd and feeling that his wealth entitled him to better treatment, he pushed aggressively through the people in front of him, causing several tourists to stumble and cry out in surprise. "Move out of my way," he demanded, his voice rising above the approaching music. "I'm an important businessman, and I deserve to be in front." His behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, drawing disapproving looks from the diverse crowd of visitors who had all come to enjoy this peaceful ceremony together. The situation escalated rapidly when Marcus reached the front barrier and found himself face to face with Sergeant Morrison, who stood at perfect attention just a few feet away. The guard's unwavering focus and professional demeanor seemed to infuriate Marcus even more, as if James's refusal to acknowledge his demands was a personal insult to his status and importance. What happened next would be talked about for years to come, shared across social media platforms, and become a defining moment that neither man would ever forget. The crowd, the ceremony, and the peaceful morning. Without warning, Marcus Wellington leaned forward and spat directly at Sergeant James Morrison's face, the saliva hitting the guard's cheek and running down toward his perfectly maintained uniform. The crowd gasped in horror, with several people crying out in shock and disgust at what they had just witnessed. Children pointed and asked their parents what had happened, while teenagers immediately began reaching for their phones to record what would surely become a viral moment. James felt the warm spittle on his skin but remained absolutely motionless, his eyes fixed straight ahead as his training demanded. Inside, however, a storm of emotions raged. The humiliation of being treated with such disrespect in front of hundreds of tourists was almost overwhelming, but his years of discipline and commitment to duty kept him perfectly still. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign of the tremendous self-control he was exercising. "That's what I think of your stupid little costume parade," Marcus sneered loudly, ensuring that everyone around could hear his words. "You're nothing but a tourist attraction. A joke in a funny hat. In America, real men don't play dress-up for entertainment." His voice carried across the stunned crowd, with many people beginning to film the unfolding incident, while others started moving away from the increasingly volatile situation. The businessman's assault on the guard had crossed a line that even the most patient observers couldn't ignore. An elderly British gentleman in the crowd called out, "That's absolutely disgraceful behavior, sir," while a woman from Australia shouted, "Someone should call the police." The morning's peaceful ceremony had been transformed into a tense confrontation that was being recorded by dozens of phones and cameras. Security officers stationed around the palace perimeter had noticed the commotion and were moving through the crowd toward the incident, but they moved carefully to avoid causing additional panic among the families and tourists who were caught in the middle of this unexpected situation. Their approach was methodical and professional, trained to handle disruptions without escalating the situation further. Marcus, emboldened by what he perceived as weakness in the guard's lack of response, decided to continue his verbal assault. "Look at him," he announced to the crowd. "He can't even defend himself. What kind of soldier is afraid to fight back? This is exactly what's wrong with this whole country. No backbone, no real strength." His words revealed not only his ignorance about the guard's training and purpose, but also his own deep-seated insecurities masked by aggressive behavior. James remained in position, though those closest to him could see the slight tremor in his hands as he fought to control his emotions. The spittle was still visible on his face, a stark reminder of the humiliation he was enduring while maintaining his duty. Years of military discipline warred with his natural human instincts to respond to such a personal attack, but his commitment to his role and his respect for the institution he represented kept him frozen in place. The crowd's reaction began to shift from shock to anger as people realized what they had witnessed. Tourists who had come from around the world to see this symbol of British tradition were appalled by the Americans' behavior. A group of teenagers from France began loudly criticizing Marcus in their native language, while a family from Japan looked on in obvious disapproval and disgust. "You should be ashamed of yourself," called out a woman with a distinct London accent. "That young man is serving his country with honor, and you're behaving like a spoiled child." Her words resonated with many in the crowd, and soon other voices joined in expressing their outrage at what they had witnessed. The tide of public opinion was clearly turning against the wealthy businessman. Security was now close enough to intervene, but they paused as they noticed something unexpected happening in the crowd. Instead of chaos or further escalation, people were beginning to organize themselves in support of the humiliated guard. Tourists who had been strangers moments before were now united in their condemnation of Marcus's behavior and their admiration for James's professionalism under extreme provocation. A young boy, no more than 8 years old, tugged on his father's sleeve and whispered something that made the man smile despite the tense situation. The father then approached the barrier and called out to James, "My son wants you to know that you're a real hero, soldier. We think you're brilliant." The innocent words of a child seemed to cut through the tension and reminded everyone present of what the ceremony was really about. Marcus realized that his actions had not had the effect he intended. Instead of asserting his dominance or proving his superiority, he had succeeded only in uniting the entire crowd against him. People were no longer intimidated by his aggressive behavior. Instead, they were disgusted by it. His face reddened as he began to understand that his wealth and status meant nothing in this situation. The businessman's discomfort grew as he noticed security approaching and heard the increasingly vocal disapproval from the crowd. What had started as an attempt to assert his importance had backfired spectacularly, and he was now the focal point of hundreds of disapproving stares and angry comments. His expensive suit and gold accessories suddenly seemed garish and inappropriate rather than impressive. James could feel the support of the crowd without breaking his military bearing, and it strengthened his resolve to maintain his dignity despite the assault he had endured. The warmth of their approval contrasted sharply with the cold humiliation of Marcus's attack, reminding him of why he had chosen to serve and why his duty meant more than any personal comfort or pride. The morning sun continued to shine down on the scene, but the atmosphere had changed completely from the festive anticipation of the ceremony to something much more serious and profound. What should have been a simple tourist attraction had become a moment that would test the character of everyone involved and reveal truths about honor, respect, and human dignity that would resonate far beyond this single morning at Buckingham Palace. Atmosphere were all about to be shattered by a single act of disrespect that would reveal the true character of both men involved. Marcus Wellington, consumed by his anger and sense of entitlement, stepped closer to the guard and made a choice that would expose not only his own character, but also the remarkable strength and professionalism of the man standing silently before him in the red tunic and bearskin hat. As security officers reached the scene, something unexpected began to happen in the crowd. A woman from Canada stepped forward and handed James a pristine white handkerchief through the barrier, her eyes filled with respect and sympathy. "For your face, soldier," she said quietly. "You've shown more strength in these few minutes than most people show in a lifetime." Her gesture sparked something beautiful among the watching tourists. One by one, people began moving closer to show their support for the humiliated guard. An elderly veteran from Scotland, his own military bearing evident despite his civilian clothes, saluted James with tears in his eyes. "Served in Northern Ireland myself," he said in a voice thick with emotion. "You've done your regiment proud today, lad. Real proud." His words carried the weight of shared military experience and mutual respect. Children in the crowd, guided by their parents, began placing flowers at the base of the barrier near where James stood. A little girl from Spain carefully laid a single red rose while her mother explained in whispered Spanish about honor and duty. The simple innocence of their gestures created a powerful contrast to the ugliness of Marcus's behavior just moments before. The businessman found himself increasingly isolated as the crowd's attention focused on celebrating the guard's professionalism rather than condemning his assault. People actively moved away from Marcus, creating a visible circle of empty space around him that spoke louder than any words could have. His expensive clothes and aggressive posture now made him look petty and small compared to the quiet dignity of the man he had attacked. Social media notifications began buzzing on phones throughout the crowd as early videos of the incident started spreading online. Comments poured in from around the world, with viewers expressing outrage at Marcus's behavior and admiration for James's restraint. The hashtag #RespectTheGuard began trending within minutes, accompanied by photos and videos of the flowers being placed and the crowd's supportive response. Marcus, realizing that his situation was becoming worse by the minute, attempted to leave the scene quietly. However, the security officers had other plans, and they politely but firmly requested that he remain available for questioning. His wealth and status, which had always protected him before, were meaningless in the face of his public assault on a member of the military. The law applied equally to everyone, regardless of their bank account. James maintained his position throughout the entire incident, never breaking character or abandoning his duty despite the personal humiliation he had endured. His commitment to his role impressed even the security officers, who had seen many disruptions over the years, but rarely witnessed such professional dedication under such personal attack. The guard's behavior exemplified the best traditions of military service. As news crews arrived on the scene, drawn by the viral social media posts, they found a story far more complex and inspiring than a simple assault incident. The focus quickly shifted from the negative actions of one man to the positive response of hundreds of strangers who had united to support a soldier doing his duty. The narrative became one of human decency, triumphing over entitled behavior. An impromptu ceremony began to develop as more tourists learned what had happened and came to pay their respects to James. People shared stories of military family members, spoke about the importance of respect and dignity, and took photos with the growing collection of flowers and supportive messages that were accumulating near the guard's position. The incident had transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. Marcus was eventually escorted away by security for formal questioning, his brief moment of entitled rage having cost him far more than he could have imagined. Videos of his behavior would follow him for years, affecting his business relationships and personal reputation in ways that no amount of money could repair. His single act of disrespect had revealed his true character to the world. The official changing of the guard ceremony continued despite the disruption, with James participating with the same precision and dignity he had maintained throughout the entire incident. The crowd's applause for the guards was notably louder and more enthusiastic than usual, their appreciation deepened by what they had witnessed about the character and professionalism of these young men and women. Later that day, James was visited by his commanding officer, who had heard about the incident through official channels and social media. Instead of reprimanding him for being involved in a public disturbance, the officer commended his restraint and professional behavior under extreme provocation. "You represented not just your regiment today," he told James, "but the best of what it means to serve with honor." The story spread far beyond London, reaching military bases around the world where it became an example used in training about maintaining discipline under pressure. James received letters and messages from veterans, active military personnel, and civilians from dozens of countries, all expressing their admiration for his conduct and their disgust with Marcus's behavior. 6 months later, James received an unexpected honor when he was selected to participate in a special ceremony recognizing exceptional military bearing and dedication to duty. The incident that had begun as a moment of humiliation had ultimately become the foundation for recognition and respect that would follow him throughout his military career and beyond. Marcus Wellington's business suffered significantly as clients and partners distanced themselves from the negative publicity surrounding his behavior. Several hotels canceled contracts, and his reputation in New York's business community never fully recovered. The man who had thought his wealth made him superior to others learned that character and respect cannot be purchased with money. The flowers left by tourists that morning were carefully collected and preserved, becoming part of an informal memorial to the dignity and professionalism shown by all members of the Queen's Guard. The incident became a reminder that true strength comes not from wealth or aggression, but from the quiet courage to do one's duty with honor, regardless of the circumstances or provocations one might face.